So I think the Ganpati festival has been big in Maharashtra for a few centuries, going back to the Shivaji and Peshwa era as well. And Ganpati as a god has, I mean, some of the temples and some of the history associated with it goes back further, even 1,000 years back. But let's fast forward to the 17th and 18th centuries. 17th century, especially in the 18th century, Ganesh festival, Ganpati festival was quite big in Maharashtra, and again, especially here in Pune, which in the 18th century became the de facto capital of the Maratha Empire when Bajirao set up Shanwarwa and shifted over here. In the Peshwa era, this was a huge festival celebrated with a lot of pomp and splendor in Shanwarwada, as well as all the other vadas of the big sardars of the Peshwas, right? And there are some very good descriptions available today made by historians. These are actual records from that era, both made by the local officials of that time, as well as by some British visitors. And through that, we get a very good insight of how exactly the festival was celebrated back then, down to minute details. So we have excellent historical records from about 250 years back onwards. And through that, we realized that this was a big deal. There were festivities going on for 10 days, similar to what we do right now. There were processions on elephants, and especially for the Peshwas, Ganpati was probably one of their most favorite and top gods. So they put particular, I mean, they were they were religious, and they were into all kinds of festivals, but especially Ganesh festival got special significance during that era. So we have a lot of details around that, and that entire celebrations came to an abrupt end in 1818, right? So basically 1817 is when, after the Third Anglo-Maratha War, is when the British captured Pune. This was in November of 1817, and the war eventually ended in 1818 with the exile of Bajirao II. But so I guess you can make a point that 1817 Ganeshotsav was the last major Ganeshotsav in Pune for nearly 100 years, right? Because after that, the British came over, many of the Sardars of the Peshwa also moved on, and Ganesh festival pretty much disappeared from Pune. People continued to celebrate it in their homes, like they do even now, but the public festivities just completely stopped and died down. Now, what happened was interesting. In the meantime, the tradition of Pune had migrated to through the entire Maratha Empire into places like Indore, Gwalior, Vadodara, where the Gaikwads were there, and all the other areas, right? So, and because some of these kingdoms or some of these principalities had struck deals with the British, and the local, I guess, rulers continued, the festivities did continue there to some extent. So it's very interesting that in I'll fast forward to 1892, and there were a few people from Pune who had visited Gwalior in the recent past at that time, probably 1890, 1891. And they came back to Pune and started talking about how Ganeshotsav is a big deal and celebrated with a lot of pomp and splendor publicly in Gwalior, near the palace and around the palace and all that. And the Pune people started thinking, and of course, I mean, there was historical documentation about the fact that Shanwarwada saw something similar 80, 90 years back. So they said, why can't we set up a public festival here in Pune as well? So there were 2 or 3 key leaders. There was a Khasgiwale, I forgot the names. I'll get the names to you in a bit. In fact, I have them right here. Khasgiwale, Gotavdekar, and Shri Bhau Rangari. So they set up what was Pune's first public Ganpati Mandal and a public celebration in 1892, right? And so Bhau Rangari, which continues to have their public festivities even today, is credited as being the first public Ganpati Mandal in Pune. So this is a trick question. Did Tilak set up the first mandal? No, actually it was set up by these 3 guys. But Tilak, who at that time was already probably the biggest leader in Pune, one of the biggest leaders in India, quickly saw the potential of this. And he got involved in this. And the next year, five big public mandals were set up, which included the famous Dagdushet Halwai Mandai and Tilak's own Kesri Vada. And then Tilak made this a mission to make this popular, not just in Pune, but even outside Pune, in Bombay of that time and all over India. So, yes, Tilak is definitely credited with making this into a big public festival. And Tilak, as we know, we talked a lot about Tilak last week when we were celebrating his 100th Punyatithi. He was a man of who wanted to drive social change, and he wanted obviously his goals were political, but he wanted the revival of the old Indian culture, the old Indian philosophy, and make that the cornerstone. He wrote a slight digression, but he wrote his famous Gita Rahasya, right? And the whole objective of that was focusing on a call to action, right? He wanted people to understand Gita and the ancient and the not so ancient Hindu Dharma as something that focuses on action. And he wanted people to come together, to get together, to not hide some of these festivities, not shy away from them, which is what three generations of probably not just Punekar, but all of Indians were doing when the British had sort of taken charge, right? So this was part of his grand revival. The Shiva Jayanti also started around the same time. That was another thing to get people together. And so Tilak basically helped take it to the next level in terms of making it a public festivity, not just in Pune, but all over India. So in that sense, yes, he needs to be credited as the person who took it public, even though he didn't set up the first one per se.